Afternoon. My name is Frederick. You can call me Fred if you consider me to be your friend. Hope you're well this afternoon. Hi to everybody at Cranley Community Church and friends. I was reading an article this week about distance discipling on our blog. And this blog was written by Steve Morrell, a leader, an apostolic leader, global apostolic leader that I respect, that knows disciple making, has made many disciples, consider himself a disciple of Christ, and continue to make disciples. And interestingly, is the topic or the heading of this blog was distance discipleship. Is it new? Very interesting. And he was pointing out the account of the Apostle Paul and his protege, Timothy. In fact, it's based on his second letter to Timothy. And at this time, the Apostle Paul was in jail in Rome, and Timothy was in Ephesus. And just in this COVID-19 time, I think a lot of our emphasis and efforts has been focused on how do we deliver our Sunday services, to our congregants, to our brothers and sisters. And perhaps we got to think a bit more deliberately of how we are equipping and discipling in this time, or distance discipling. And interestingly, he makes 3 points about distance discipling. The one is that it forces clarity. The second thing is it results in transferability. And then the third point is that it produces a longing for embodied relationships. So just talking about that first point, that forces clarity. Now the Apostle Paul obviously was in jail, not because he wanted to be there. I think if we read 2 Timothy, he had a desire to actually see, as most of us, haven't seen each other face to face. We have a desire to see face to face, and I think most of us can agree that it's a little bit easier to disciple or to talk or have a conversation with a person face to face. So the Apostle Paul, he was in jail, and he had to really think, what am I going to put in this letter? How am I going to make it clear so that Timothy can understand it? It's a little bit like I had the privilege of being involved in community radio for a few years, and it's a very interesting medium compared to television, because in radio your listeners, your audience can't see you, so you got to be so deliberate in trying to paint a picture so that the person through the radio waves can get an idea or get a good understanding of what you're saying or what you're wanting to portray. And I can feel and I can identify with the Apostle Paul. And you got to think, how am I going to put things so clearly? So in the same way, in distance discipleship, whether we do it through Zoom, WhatsApp or whatever, we really got to, it forces clarity. We've got to think what we want to say. The second point is that it results in transferability. In fact, the Apostle Paul, I think it was a habit of his that when he was writing a letter, he was encouraging that particular person to share it with the church and then also with other churches. And that we can find in Colossians 4 verse 16. And Paul says, now when this epistle is read among you, see that it is read also in the church of the Laodiceans, and that you likewise read the epistle from Laodicea. It was just a good habit, it just shows the transferability. And even the fact that this, Apostle Paul was writing to Timothy in the first century, and look where we are now. Paul must have wondered, are they going to understand? Is this letter even going to reach Timothy? But, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, it is last over the centuries, and we, even in our day, this is applicable to us as followers of Christ. So distance equipping results in transferability. It can be transferred from one setting to another, from one person to another. And the third point that he makes is that it produces a longing for embodied relationship. Now, in this COVID-19 era, yes, we have to make use of Zoom and WhatsApp and Facebook and all these apps and measures, but it does not replace, that face-to-face contact. It's just not the same. Yes, it's got a place to play, and I hope creatively, when all restrictions are lifted, we can still employ it in a creative way to reach and to equip and to disciple others, but it's not just quite the same. And you can go look at statistics in terms of people that spend their time on the social media and Facebook or whatever, that the stats say people are often a lot more lonely than what they used to be. It's just not the same as talking, having a conversation with a person face to face. I was reading an article a few weeks as well about, they were calling it Zoom, what did they call it? People are just getting off Zoom, kind of burnout, because there must be so much concentration when you're obviously on a Zoom call. It's just not the same. Although it works and it is very helpful for us in the season, but I think they call it Zoom burnout or something. But it just does not replace that place of having to speak to a person face to face. And I mean, this we can see in 2 Timothy 1 verse 4, where it says, 1 Timothy 1, I'm going to read verse 3 as well. 2 Timothy 1 verses 3 and 4. Paul says, I thank God, whom I serve with a pure conscience, as my fathers did, as without ceasing I remember you in my prayers night and day, greatly desiring to see you, being mindful of your tears, that I may be filled with joy. And then also chapter 4, 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 9, Paul says, be diligent to come to me quickly. He was longing for that relationships. So in this COVID-19 era, brothers and sisters, friends, let us not stop with this, with equipping people. Let us be creative about how we do it, and because this is the call of God, that He has called us to go and make disciples. So I just want to pray for you and encourage you. Continue the distance equipping. Continue to make disciples. God bless.